Week 3. The Price of Memory. County Clare, Ireland, late March 1847. Eileen was awake long before dawn. The cottage was silent except for Michael's breathing. She lay listening to it. Every rise of his chest seemed a struggle now. Every breath was followed by the faint rattle that had begun only 2 nights before. She had heard that sound once before. It had been Seamus's. She closed her eyes tightly. Not again, Lord, not again. Carefully, so as to not wake the others, she rose from the mattress and dressed by the fading glow of the embers. The shawl lay neatly folded on the table, and for a long moment she simply stared at it. She remembered her mother's hands placing it over her shoulders on her wedding morning. "There'll be hard days," her mother had said. "There always are. But this belonged to your grandmother, and now it'll belong to you. It'll remind you where you've come from." Her mother had never imagined that one day it might be sold to buy medicine. Eileen picked it up and pressed it gently against her cheek. Then she wrapped it in linen and slipped it into her basket. Patrick walked with her as far as the lane. Neither spoke much. There seemed very little left to say. At the crossroads he stopped. "I'll not go further." "I know. If anyone offers too little, I'll bargain. If no one offers enough—" She smiled sadly. "We're in no position to bargain any more." Patrick looked away. She reached up and touched his face. "This isn't your shame." "It feels like it. You've worked this land every day since you were a boy. It still won't feed us. It isn't because you've failed." Patrick looked towards the ruined fields. "Tell that to my children." She kissed him gently, then turned towards Kilrush. Patrick watched until the morning mist swallowed her. The town was busier than she had ever known it, not with commerce, with desperation. Outside the chapel, women knelt praying. Along the streets, families sat against walls, wrapped in blankets too thin for the season. Several children wandered barefoot, despite the cold. Near the market square, a charity kitchen had opened. A line stretched nearly the length of the street. Eileen joined it briefly, hoping perhaps there might be enough for Michael. An elderly woman ahead of her shook her head. "They've none left." "They've not started serving?" "They've already run out." The words scarcely seemed possible. "They've only just opened." "They serve until the pot's empty." "How long?" The old woman gave a weary smile. "About 20 minutes." Eileen quietly stepped away. There were people behind her who looked even hungrier. She entered O'Donnell's general store. The shelves were thinner than she remembered, and behind the counter stood Mr. O'Donnell, a man Patrick had known since childhood. He smiled kindly. "Eileen." "Good morning. You've come for meal?" "I've come," she hesitated, "to sell." The smile disappeared. Without another word, she unfolded the shawl. Mr. O'Donnell handled it carefully. His fingers traced the fine weaving. "That's beautiful work. My grandmother made much of it herself. I remember seeing your mother wear it." "So do I." He sighed deeply. "I wish times were different." "So do I." He examined the cloth once more before naming a price. It was less than half what it would have brought only a few years before. Eileen's heart sank. Surely it's worth more. "It is." "Then no one has money, Eileen." He spread his hands helplessly. "The few who still have coin are buying food. Beautiful things no longer sell." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I can give you another shilling. You'd lose money. I've known your family all my life." She swallowed hard. "Thank you." He counted the coins into her hand. Each one seemed to weigh more than the shawl itself. Before wrapping it away, she touched the fabric one last time. "Goodbye." Mr. O'Donnell said nothing. Neither of them could bear to. Her first stop was the apothecary. The shop smelt of herbs and spirits. Glass bottles lined every shelf. Things that might save a life, if one could afford them. The apothecary listened as she described Michael's cough. "How long?" "Nearly 3 weeks." "Fever?" "Yes." "Coughing blood?" "Not yet." He frowned. "I can prepare something." Hope flickered inside her. "Will it cure him?" The man hesitated. I can't promise that." "What will it cost?" He named the price. It was nearly every coin she possessed. Eileen stared silently at the money in her hand. Medicine or food? Enough meal to keep everyone alive for perhaps another week. She thought of Michael, then of Mary, Bridget, Patrick, 4 hungry faces, 1 sick child. Her fingers trembled. The apothecary spoke gently. If it were my son, she looked up hopefully, I'd buy the medicine. He did not finish the sentence. She understood anyway, because he was his son. A mother should try, perhaps, whatever the cost. Slowly, she placed the coins on the counter. She left carrying a small brown bottle wrapped in paper. It seemed impossibly small, so little for so much. Only 3 pennies remained. She bought a loaf of coarse barley bread, smaller than she'd hoped, larger than none. The journey home felt longer. The wind had strengthened. Rain threatened from the west, and as she neared the cottage, she saw Patrick repairing part of the stone wall that had collapsed during winter. He looked up immediately. Their eyes met. He looked first at the basket, then at her shoulders. Bare. He knew, without a word. She slowly handed him the bottle. This is all? It was almost all the money. And the shawl? She nodded, gone. Patrick took the medicine gently. It felt strangely light. So little. I know. He looked at her shoulders again. She instinctively folded her arms against the cold, and for the first time in 15 years she had no shawl. Patrick removed his own heavy coat. She shook her head. You'll freeze. So will you. She tried to refuse, but he draped it around her anyway. Michael managed a faint smile when he saw the bottle. Is that for me? It is. Will it make me better? Eileen forced herself to smile. It'll help. Patrick noticed that she had not answered the question. For 3 days they measured every spoonful exactly as instructed, morning, afternoon, night. Michael never complained about the bitter taste. He thanked his mother every time, and by the 4th morning the fever had eased a little. His cough remained, but he was able to sit outside for nearly an hour in the pale sunshine. Bridget laughed for the first time in weeks when he managed to tell one of Patrick's old stories about a fox stealing a priest's supper. Even Patrick smiled. It wasn't much, but it was something. Hope had become such a rare visitor that they welcomed even the smallest glimpse of it. That evening, Patrick walked the boundaries of his field. The corn stood quietly in the fading light. Soon it would begin growing in earnest. If the weather held, if no disease struck it, if the prices remained fair, if... There were too many ifs. As he reached the lane, he noticed another tenant, Liam O'Shea, approaching. Liam looked older than his 50 years, much older. They took the Murphys today, Liam said without greeting. Patrick stopped. Evicted? Liam nodded. They'd no rent. What'll become of them? The workhouse, I suppose. And if it's full? Liam looked toward the distant hills. Then God help them. They stood in silence. Finally, Liam spoke again. I heard something in Kilrush. What? More grain ships? Patrick nodded. There are always more grain ships. This week they say there'll be soldiers at the docks. Patrick frowned. Soldiers? To keep order. Patrick understood immediately. Hungry people had begun watching the ships, watching food leave while children starved. Desperation was a dangerous thing. So it begins, Liam said quietly. Patrick looked back towards his cottage. A candle glowed faintly in the window. His family was inside. Still together, still alive, for now. He whispered a prayer that he scarcely believed any more. Lord, let us have one more week. Week 4. The Landlord's Men. County Clare, Ireland, early April 1847. The improvement in Michael lasted only 2 days. By the 3rd morning, the cough had returned. It came deeper now, tearing through his thin frame until he bent double, clutching his chest. When the fit finally passed, Eileen offered him the last spoonful of medicine from the little brown bottle. He swallowed it obediently. Is there any more? He asked. Eileen turned the bottle upside down. Nothing. She smiled as brightly as she could. We'll see if Mr. O'Donnell can help us again. Michael nodded, although he knew as well as his mother that there was nothing left to sell. The spring rains came steadily, not enough to restore the potatoes, they were beyond saving, but enough to coax the field of oats and corn into healthy green. Patrick found himself in the cruelest of positions. Every morning he tended a crop he dared not eat. He pulled weeds, he repaired broken fencing, he chased crows from the young shoots. The grain was thriving, his children were not. More than once, Bridget stopped beside the cornfield. It looks lovely, Da. It does. When will we eat it? Patrick's hand tightened around the handle of his hoe. We won't. She frowned. But it's ours. He looked at the neat rows stretching across the field. No, love. It grows here. It does. You planted it. I did. She looked genuinely puzzled. Then whose is it? Patrick took a long breath. It belongs to the man who owns the land. Does he live nearby? No. Has he ever seen it? Patrick hesitated. No. Then how does he know it's his? Patrick had no answer that an 8-year-old would understand. Late one afternoon, the sound of horses echoed along the lane. Mary looked out through the tiny window. Da! Patrick was already standing. He recognized the riders before they reached the gate. Mr. William Pemberton, the estate agent. Behind him rode 2 assistants. One carried a leather ledger, the other held a measuring rod. Patrick stepped outside. Eileen joined him, wiping flour, little more than ground oats, from her hands. The children remained just inside the doorway. Pemberton dismounted with practised ease. Mr. Dunne. Sir, I trust your crop is progressing. As well as can be expected. Pemberton looked across the fields without expression. We shall see. He motioned to the younger assistant. Begin. The man walked directly into the cornfield. Patrick watched in confusion. The assistant counted rows, measured distances, made notes in the ledger. Every few yards he paused to examine the growing stalks before recording another figure. Patrick looked back toward Pemberton. What is this, sir? A survey. I've never known one before. The landlord has instructed that all grain be carefully accounted for this season. Patrick understood at once. Rumours had reached the estate. Hungry tenants, missing grain, night harvesting. Pemberton folded his gloved hands behind his back. There has been unfortunate dishonesty elsewhere. Patrick felt the accusation even though none had been spoken. We've stolen nothing. I sincerely hope not. Nearly an hour passed before the assistant returned. Completed, sir. Pemberton accepted the ledger. He nodded once. Very good. Then he turned his full attention back to Patrick. The acreage has been measured. He tapped the ledger. The number of rows has been recorded. Another tap. The expected yield has been estimated. Patrick remained silent. If between now and harvest any appreciable quantity disappears... He let the sentence hang in the ear. Patrick answered quietly, It won't be because of us. The responsibility will nevertheless be yours. Eileen stepped forward. My son is ill. Pemberton looked toward the cottage. I'm sorry to hear it. We've sold nearly everything. He inclined his head politely but said nothing. The potatoes failed. I'm aware. We've no money. The rent remains due. Patrick felt something tighten inside him. How are we to pay before harvest? Pemberton's face remained composed. The terms of your tenancy require payment. There is no crop to sell. You have grain. It isn't harvested. You have livestock? Pemberton almost laughed. We sold the donkey before Christmas. The pig? Gone. Fowl? Gone. Furniture? Patrick glanced back through the open doorway. What little remains, we sleep on. Pemberton sighed almost imperceptibly. I do not make the rules, Mr. Dunne. No. You understand my position? Patrick met his eyes. I understand yours. And mine? For just a moment the 2 men stood looking at one another. Patrick answered softly. I wonder if you understand ours. Pemberton said nothing for several seconds. Then he opened the ledger once more. The rent is due in 9 days. Patrick closed his eyes briefly. I cannot promise what I don't have. The landlord expects payment, and if I fail? Pemberton hesitated. The hesitation itself was answer enough. Proceedings will begin. Eileen gripped Patrick's arm. She knew what proceedings meant. Eviction. As the agent prepared to leave, he paused beside the cornfield. He rested one hand lightly on a young stalk. I'll return before harvest. Patrick remained silent. I know exactly how many rows stand in this field. He looked directly at Patrick. My assistant knows. The landlord knows. He closed the ledger. If I find as much as a single section cut before the proper time. Another pause. I shall assume it was taken by your household. Patrick's jaw tightened. We're hungry, Mr. Pemberton. I know. My children are hungry. I know. My boy is sick. I know. Patrick looked toward the green field. It takes a hard sort of man to stand before starving children and warn them not to eat. For the first time since arriving, something flickered across Pemberton's face. Weariness. Perhaps even shame. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. It takes a harder world to require it. He mounted his horse. "I advise you, Mr. Dunne, do not force me to return under worse circumstances." The riders disappeared down the lane. No one spoke for several minutes. Even the children sensed something had changed. Finally, Mary broke the silence. "Da?" "Yes." "Would they really throw us out?" Patrick looked around the little cottage, the cracked walls, the patched roof, the hearth where generations of his family had gathered. Outside, the ash tree his father had planted the year Patrick was born. He answered honestly, "Yes." Bridget looked frightened. "But where would we go?" No one answered because everyone knew. The workhouse. The very word carried dread through County Clare. Families separated, hard labour, disease, crowded dormitories. Many entered, far fewer left. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Patrick walked into the cornfield. The moon hung low over the Atlantic. The young stalks whispered in the wind. He knelt. 1 ear of grain, just one when it ripened, could be ground into meal. Enough for several loaves. Enough to quiet a child's hunger. He reached out, his fingers brushed against the leaves. Then he remembered the measuring rod, the ledger, the counted rows, the warning. He withdrew his hand as though it had burnt. The grain stood untouched. Patrick remained kneeling in the darkness, not because the crop belonged to the landlord, but because if he took it and they were discovered, his family would lose even the miserable shelter that still stood behind him. For the first time in his life, he understood how hunger could become stronger than honesty, and he feared the day when it finally did. Inside the cottage, Eileen lay awake listening to the silence between Michael's coughs. Each pause seemed longer than the last. She wondered which would arrive first, the rent collector or death. She no longer knew which frightened her more.